Now look, I'm usually a very tame, calm individual who refrains from using hyperbole in any circumstance. Phrases like worst ever or best worst of the year or decade or what have you are personal things I find to be an irritant, as I believe everything should be judged case by case, that no two films are alike and shouldn't be compared to each other just because, and that smothering something under a certain type of excess praise or hate does the film a disservice, as it can paint an inaccurate picture of what's in store for a potential viewer, and thus create unfair expectations, or lack thereof. However, I also pride myself on honesty, so I can say without much hesitation that this film, this one right here, is potentially one of the absolute dullest action movies of the last decade. The plot, what little there really is here, is a loose remake of a Norwegian film from the late 1980s dealing with the historical hotbed of the Vikings coming to America long before the Spanish and what their interactions were with the natives. Here we get essentially a conflict between a tribe and some Viking raiders in a very strongly 300-esque stylized bloodbath, all part of some big destiny spiel concerning a half-caste who's a Viking raised as a Native American, the titular Pathfinder, and how he will go on to do great things and walk the line between worlds and yada yada. I really couldn't be asked to care that much, as you will soon find out. And it's little more than an excuse for all the violence. Given where the priorities blatantly were, let's start with those visuals. While the sets and costuming are honestly not half bad and do convey that grim, grimy, primal savagery, as well as contrast between the leaner, smaller natives and the big, bulky, almost monstrous Vikings, Remake's regular Marcus Niespel treats us to some of the worst shot and poorly paced action ever put to screen. This is down to, well, most of the time it being impossible to see anything given how dark the film is. It's almost like they blew all the lights out and decided to just film anyway. This is a really, really poor attempt at trying to give the film a stylized look, making it so you can't tell half the time who is fighting who unless they're in silhouette, and when mixed with some pretty choppy editing work that often doesn't allow you to fully enjoy the scene anyway, the fights often have no real tension or intensity to them at all. Not even the casting can do anything about this. In fact, save for the usually dependable Carl Urban as our ethnically divided hero, no one else left an impression. The rest of the native tribe were boring on one note, and the Vikings did little more than yell and grunt almost continuously, almost cartoonishly, even when they weren't in combat, and they lack any real menace after their first full appearance in battle gear. And no amount of cool-looking armor is going to change when your villains have no weight to them. But then again, no one could save a paper-thin narrative like this one, filled to the absolute bursting point with every hackneyed and tired outcast, this is your destiny, like your father, cross the line between worlds trope imaginable, rendering even the slightest bit of investment or intrigue completely and utterly moot. You can see each and every narrative beat and twist coming 10 miles away. And the film makes absolutely no effort to hide this whatsoever. If you think it's coming, guess what? It probably is. Oh, the girlfriend gets kidnapped here. Tick. Oh, the Viking has the big bad guy speech here. Tick. Oh, the main guy is going to lure the Vikings into an ice trap in order to defeat their forces. Check, check, check. The characterization is no help either. It's borderline non-existent outside of whatever is necessary just for us to get to the next fight scene, so we barely get any sort of attachment to our main cast, or any dimension on the Vikings other than, hey, these are the natives and these are the Vikings and now they fight because it looks cool. And the dialogue is so incredibly rigid and stiff and on the nose that it feels like the production team had no faith in their audience and spoon-feed every last detail to you in the most obnoxious and condescending manner possible. Sometimes you might as well ask if the cast are reading off of really wordy cue cards, because that's how it feels sometimes. Look, I apologize for all the harshness in this review, but I can't butter this up. By comparison, 300 may not have been deep, but it did enough on a narrative level that, even when you weren't watching the Spartans be awesome and killing loads of Persians, you actually had some investment in their plight as they stood up to this gigantic enemy horde, horrifically outnumbered, and what would happen if the Persians took over. The film gave you a sense of the stakes, of why the characters were there, and who they were, even if a lot of them were just your familiar warrior archetypes. At least you got to know them in some way, and you got to care. Pathfinder seems content in just dumping things on you, and expecting you to just go with it. Oh hey, you'll side with the hero because he's of two worlds, just like any other of these films. That's enough, right? Oh hey, you'll hate the Vikings because they grunt and they're tall and they're ugly looking. That's enough, right? No, it's not. It's just plain atrocious sloppy writing, and when combined with the terrible action, leaves you with a film that could have just been a mindless way to chew popcorn and see Native Americans duke it out with Vikings, and that honestly wouldn't have been so bad. I can live with that. I enjoy 300. I enjoy 300 Rise of an Empire. Both bloody meat-headed movies. But instead, Pathfinder decides to just go the lazy way and become a film school exercise in everything that can go wrong with a big-budget production. Even Nispel's aggressively mediocre Conan reboot that he made after this was more compelling. At least there I could tell what was on screen, and it had a few okay fights in it. This has nothing, gives nothing, says nothing, and ultimately doesn't accomplish anything. What should have been just a relatively harmless, bloody fun time ends up being one of the absolute most boring films I have sat through in many years. Dare I say, I would much rather watch The Legend of Hercules over this any day of the week.